have you been taking notes on what has been going on inside this courtroom? I know I have been, and I'm telling you, I'm going to go through just a few of them with you here, partly because we broke the news that we did earlier today. So, there may be some follow-up questions on that. And we can also answer some questions for you or look at some of the different comments. I also have a copy of the Ephron lawsuit issues here. This has to do with the defendants, of course. Mr. Mayers' response to a lawsuit by Mr. Ephron, and I got to tell you, his attorneys, Benchu, Camille Vasquez, got to be twisting just a little bit. But we'll get into that in just a couple of minutes here. Okay, so is this guy classic or what? It's like this is just like a poorly scripted film. You got this guy who doesn't want to be there, doesn't realize that his little story may not be playing well, that the facts he's testifying to may not be believable, that he seems to lie depending on the given day and the question being asked, because one day it means one thing, one day it means another. And I want to mention before I forget, coming up tonight at 6 o'clock, Neil Rockine will be on special guest host as Linda Kinney Bodden is on assignment today. We've been chatting, though, while she's squeezing in some attorney work. So let's talk about the very first thing that happened today. Okay, remember, the redirect began at the end of Friday. Didn't go very far, but got warmed up. I think it was about 35, 40 minutes. So today, Pauly P is there to continue his redirect. We learned last week that during the flamethrower cross-examination by Joe Tacopina, that the court, and we have multiple sources for this, the court reached out to the prosecution. We're not sure of the setting there. That's a little unclear. The key is the communication. The judge wondering whether it was ethical for the prosecution to continue this case. Now, we've seen some of the questions saying, "Hey, why can't the judge just have a directed verdict at the end of the prosecution's case?" Okay, the way this information was phrased, as we understand it, was more like a hint, throwing the prosecution a lifeline, suggesting that you might want to rethink what's going on here. Not that the court sua sponte is going to act on its own, sua sponte, to help the prosecution, but maybe they ought to rethink this case in light of that outrageous cross-examination that made Mr. Relli look so bad, and then continued into day 2, which was Friday, and then into day 3 today. So when we talk about the redirect, which is, in my opinion, the cleanup on aisle 5, whatever stuff your witness did on cross, you want to get in there and mop up. But there was just too much. There was way too much for Pauly P to fix. And so what he ended up doing was kind of going over again and again the same stuff that Tacopina had gotten into him on Thursday and Friday about. It just opens the door again for Joey T to come in and start pounding away on those issues. Remember, if the redirect stays away from repeating some of those things, you can't get back into it on recross. Your recross is confined to what was handled on redirect. So if you're smart, you stay away from those trouble areas. But they couldn't do that. And when your witness, Pauly P's witness, Mr. Relli, first thing on the stand, he's asked, "Hey, did you get a hold of me yesterday and want to clarify some of your testimony from last week?" That's a bad sign. I mean, that's as bad as it gets. I appreciate them coming. You know that it wouldn't have been dropped the bomb by Joey T, because I'm sure he knows what's going on between these folks and the communication that's taking place. The last thing the prosecution wants is to then again hear how Ephron and the prosecution may have been working hard to make sure that Ephron's story is consistent with reality. So anytime the witness says, "Oh yeah, I need to change what I testified to last week because I racked my brain, I looked at my Instagram account, I realize now that gun range video, remember," and I appreciate Joe Tacopina helping me out here. That was the same clip I had cut to get into. He knew how important that was. This was the clip which was preceded by a question. Mr. Tacopina asks Ephron, "Hey, have within a month or so of this alleged shooting on November 6th, 2021, Did you go to a gun range? Simple. And I think he even said you shooting a 9mm weapon. No, definitely not. Definitely not. Okay. So, and then of course, Joey T throws the video up there. And guess what he's doing? Firing a gun at a gun range. They can't figure out where it is. I don't know. I can't remember. I guess that's me. Well, the corrected testimony was that it was in LA, and he does remember that he did it, and it was in LA, and he was mistaken. Sorry, I made a mistake. I'm sorry about that. That doesn't play very well with the jury. All right, if this guy wasn't already, a foot in the grave in terms of credibility, correcting his testimony, you might as well jump in and start burying himself with dirt. And he continued to do that. I got a couple of notes here just because it's nonstop. His lack of understanding as to what his role is as a witness in this case is just killing him. And I don't know if it's because he's so ignorant that he didn't realize if he makes the claims he's made in this criminal matter and repeats them looking for money in a civil matter, he's going to be grilled. He's going to have to come clean with what happened supporting his claim, both criminal and civil. It's almost like he thought, can we just write this up? Just write it up. And, let's just wrap this thing up. I get my money and I'll get out of everybody's way. That isn't how it works, and is becoming painfully clear to this witness and certainly to the jury that I can't believe the thing the guy says. And he's caught in lie after lie after lie. He calls Joe at one point slick. You think you're slick? Yeah, dude, if anybody's making him look slick, it's you. But he's just doing a solid job. I'm surprised he hasn't gone over the top more than he has, because Joey T can, he can be a little, hey, how you doing? Bombastic. But he's letting his suit do the talking for him. Let's see. He yelled at one point, what are we doing here? I'll tell you what you're doing here. You're sinking your case in lies. That's what you're doing. Let's see. Oh, and then when asked about the issue of the gun range, Tacopina said, well, why did you lie when you said you hadn't been to a gun range? And boom, here's the video. Quote, I just wanted to stop talking to you, end quote. I don't know. I know that our chatters have been enjoying this. And as an officer of the court, of course, I am outraged that this kind of behavior is taking place. But as somebody who watches this stuff a lot and has played the game a lot, it is entertaining. I'm sorry. I have to. I just have to tell you that. I cannot deny it. Okay, let me look at a couple questions that have come across here in the last hour or so. And the judge said they'll be back at 1:45 Pacific time. Katie says, if the judge thinks it's unethical, can't he give a directed judgment or a directed verdict? Or in California, it could be if it were after the verdict itself. Let's say for some reason there's a verdict that is adverse to the defendant. A judge can make a directed verdict notwithstanding, a directed judgment notwithstanding the verdict. He can actually overrule a jury. I would be shocked if this gets anywhere past a hung jury. I would be, but that's a possibility. But at the end of the prosecution's case, Joey T is going to be asking for a directed verdict, and it could happen. It would be supported by the information that we received by multiple sources about the judge's concern about the ethical nature of this prosecution. The judge then, when asked to rule on a directed verdict, he's got the opportunity right there in his hands to take this away from the jury, to say, we're done. I'm not going to take part in this. It is so rare. I can't remember having seen one. I know I never was lucky enough to get one when I was doing defense. I can't remember one ever being handed down. So I can't wait to see how that plays out. I have to assume we're going to hear from a few more witnesses by the prosecution, right? Anybody want to see, is it Lydia Parker? Is that her name, Lydia? There's some scuttlebutt and some now scrubbed presence on social media that she perhaps is an exotic date. Is that relevant to what she did or didn't witness? No, it's not, but it's pretty spicy. Right. So we'll see if she actually makes an appearance. I also think we may see from Justin. We hear from Justin, the business partner of Mr. Relli. That would be very interesting. Beyond that, I think we're kind of running out of bodies, which may be best for Mr. Relli at this point. Let's see. Sheila says, do you think he's regretting this now? Meaning Mr. Ephron. You know, I I think what he's regretting is what he's having to do to earn the money. I think he feels like it was going to be so easy. So is he regretting even bringing it up? I don't know if he's smart enough to regret it. I think he may be just so dumb that he's just mad that it's so hard to get his story told and believed. He may still think that, hey, that was a pain in the ass, but it's done now. We just wait for the jury to do their job. Then I take that conviction and I hand it over to Ben Chu and Camila Vasquez, and they get me $30 million. I don't know. He's not done anything yet that suggests to me he's very smart, that he would have thought this through and maybe had second thoughts, especially after Thursday, Friday, all weekend to stew, gets a hold of the DA to say, yeah, I need to kind of clarify some of my lies and make them more believable. I don't see it. I don't see this guy being, part of the Algonquin Roundtable. Raynette says, and Raynette had a nice quote. I saw it as we were going along. He said, "Jesus, take the wheel," because I think Mr. Relli has driven us all into a ditch. Was the judge out of line last week when he corrected and answered for Relli about finding the shell casings in 2 to 3 minutes after Relli said it took him a while? Yeah, I'm not sure if the judge gleaned that from some of the nonstop talk that Relli seems to offer up. Remember, he's not big on this whole Q&A format. That's not his style. He's more just the rambling dude, exchanges, talk over you, answer questions you haven't asked, offer opinions. And I think maybe somewhere in that mess, the judge gleaned that it was a more finite time period than a while. So I don't think that's a problem. Part of the judge's job in any case is to make sure the jury is getting the best information they can. And the judge may have helped the whole process by not requiring the question to be asked again and then re-answered, because fewer questions to Mr. Relli, the better, from either side, really. I mean, you heard him say today when Pauly P was on redirect, he said something like, do you remember when Mr. Tacopina asked you about blah, blah, blah? And he said, he asked a question of some sort, and he was confused by who actually asked him the question, whether it was the prosecution or the defense. He's just, Mr. Relli is just twisted in knots. There's no doubt about it. Let's see. Laundered Amber, I wonder if Rocky will file a countersuit because Relli's lying. The thing about the legal process in California, it is Evidence Code 47, I believe it is. There's a privilege about things that are said in court as part of a process. So even if there's a perjury involved, and it's a perjury that arguably is a statement that defames somebody, it's not actionable. It's a protection that the law provides for the process. Otherwise, people might be afraid to go into court, tell the truth, whatever they think it might be, because that may lead to defamation. Remember, defamation is defended by truth. Truth is a complete defense to any defamation. So the goal is to prove somebody lied about you. Well, if you're doing that with somebody who's been on the stand in a criminal or a civil case, it chills the process. People won't come forward as witnesses. People might not go in a civil case to protect their rights and obtain a money judgment because they're afraid of defamation repercussions. So that won't happen. Would there be a perjury case against him? I'm just scatting on that. Probably not, just because it's not very common. As we've seen in many, many cases, perjury is usually an add-on type, charge. If they've got other more important charges, they may throw perjury on there just to beef up the criminal complaint. Very seldom is it acted upon. It's quite often just dissolves in the midst of the bigger claims that are made in a criminal case. So, yeah. Any other questions? Please send them along. Let's see. I'm just whipping through them here just to see if there's some topics that had come up during the course of this. It is entertaining. Yes, I cannot tell a lie. Let's see. There's Brooklyn asks a question, and I think relates to the information we shared that we learned from our sources. Was that a sidebar or open court? I'm assuming that's the reference to whether the judge was concerned that the prosecution was being unethical, or continuing prosecution would be unethical. That's less clear, and we weren't able to push for that information. All we were concerned about was the actual communication, who it was between, what was the subject, and that's the information we passed along. If you haven't heard or seen that, and we've heard from multiple sources that the court, and this was in the middle, we do know the timing was in the middle of cross-examination, day one, between Mr. Tacopina and Mr. Ephron. So the court at that point apparently felt so strongly about what was happening, and we saw Relli contradicting facts, hanging out there things that might be considered lies very early on, and then it just kind of continued and got worse. So the timing of that concern by the court is probably as important as exactly how it played out. The timing of the court then continued on. Obviously, it heard more cross-examination that day and heard more the next day, and then just a touch of the redirect before Friday broke. So let's see. I want to look at this. We just got the defendant's, Mr. Mayers, answer to the complaint by Mr. Ephron. I'm telling you a couple of things about this. Is a California pleading. In California, by the way, there's only really a few pleadings: a complaint, an answer, cross complaint, answer to cross complaint. Other stuff is motions and notice of motions, right? So this is a pleading because this is the answer of Mr. Rocky to the Relli first amended complaint for defamation, which we've been talking about. A lot of things are screwed up in California these days. I'm not all that proud of my home state, but one thing they do legally, I love. Take a look at what you see there. See that where it says defendant? It very clearly tells you who this is from, who it's related to, what the claim is for, and then below that, when the original action was filed, the FAC is the first amended complaint. So when that was filed, and you can see that was 8 days after the original complaint, and then a trial date. In this case, it's TBD. There is none set. That little note on there is so helpful. If you're digging through court documents and you're not sure, okay, who's this from, who's this relate to, and more importantly, is there a hearing scheduled related to this? Oh man, I wish every jurisdiction would just take a breath and just do that. It would make my job easier, and really, that's all that matters, is making my job easier. So this is what's called a general denial. Okay, the complaint that's been filed by Mr. Relli is for defamation. So, but it also breaks down into a number of things: false statements, statements of opinion, things of that sort. Remember, statement of opinion is not actionable because it's opinion. It's not a statement of fact. So what they do is they make a general denial of all the causes of action, and they all read the same. It'll be something like the complaint does not state facts upon which a cause of action can be made. Okay. It also will say things like, let's see. There are no sworn statements, is what I'm getting at. These are all general denials. We deny on information and belief any of these things happen. There's no factual discussion in here. There's nothing to sink your teeth into. It is purely just an answer to, in this case, the first amended defamation complaint. It doesn't give you a lot. It's typical California paperwork. This just ticks off a box. Okay, have they filed their answer? Yeah, they have. Okay, tick that off. It is interesting when you look at the attorneys involved, right? Again, this is from the defendant. This is Rocky. Robert Shapiro's office. Boy, nobody else in here I think you could recognize. But it does also, of course, tell you who is served these papers. And we have Camille Vasquez with Brown Rudnick. And we also have, of course, Ben Chu. He's with Brown Rudnick as well. So those are, Linda and I have talked about this. And in light of what we've seen now in this trial, it makes us wonder, Ben Chu and Camille Vasquez, who have stellar reputations, obviously totally enhanced by representing Mr. Depp in the Depp Heard matter. This doesn't look good for them. This is a civil case. We've reached out to the DA's office about our information that we passed along and the court's concern about the ethical nature of the prosecution. We've also asked the defense attorneys to respond if possible. Remember, there's a gag order in place. So at this point, we've heard back from nobody, and I'm not so sure we will, because that technically would violate the gag order. So I would like to reach out. This I don't think would violate the gag order. We may reach out to Mr. Chu and Ms. Vasquez and ask them their thoughts of their civil case in light of what is unfolding in this courtroom. It seems to me, if I'm representing Mr. Relli and I see this case going sideways as it has, I'm not feeling so pretty good about my civil case, right? Because remember, if you have a conviction in the criminal case, you just walk across the hall, with my criminal conviction beyond a reasonable doubt, and show it to my civil folks, who all they have to do is show the claim by 51%, a preponderance of the evidence. So that's clearly a lower standard. If you've got a conviction at beyond a reasonable doubt, and you've got civil with a much lower burden, it's very easy to, let's just say it's easy to resolve the civil case. You ain't going to trial. You're going to work it out, because you got that big matzo ball that's going to come in the civil matter that shows that the defendant was convicted, and that's kind of if there is such a thing as a slam dunk, that's it. So that's the deal on this complaint. The answer to the complaint. I would not even spend 2 minutes reading it. I've looked it over for you. I mean, it's just there's nothing of substance in here, except that the defendant, Mr. Rocky, is denying everything that has been claimed in the defamation action. Okay, so not much else to cover for you here. I'm going to let you go. I think we've got some stuff from last Friday where Linda and I were kind of doing a wrap up. I think we can run that for you again and kind of hit some of these high points. I would expect after the lunch hour, they'll be back now at about an hour from now. We're going to see, who the prosecution has lined up. This case could be done tomorrow in terms of the prosecution's witnesses, maybe even more, maybe even sooner, if they don't have more witnesses than we've expected. We know they whittled the witness list down in the first place. Now, I don't know, after the star performance by Relli, maybe it's just like, let's just get this damn thing done and, take our medicine, whatever it may be, and move along. Kay Schmidt, what takes place during the preliminary hearings? How did this make it to trial? That's a very good question. That's a lot of people have been asking that question because they've seen this case unfold. And we know from Joey T's use of the preliminary hearing transcript that a lot of the material we're seeing in trial, and this jury is seeing for the first time, was covered already, because he caught, Relli has a very bad memory. The preliminary hearing was in 2023, a little more than a year, 2 years after the event, and a year and 3 or 4 months from the trial. But a year and 3 or 4 months, that Relli doesn't remember what he said then. And who knows if he's making it up then. It's much harder to remember a lie, because the truth never changes. But if you got a lie going on here and there, you can't remember which lie you told. And so Relli was caught many times by Joey T and in the use of that preliminary hearing transcript. So you have to ask the DA, and kind of like the judge is asking now, are you sure this is ethically appropriate to continue this case? What happened in the preliminary hearing that would convince the DA, yeah, we got to go forward? Because, a preliminary hearing is a piece of cake. It's almost like an indictment. The level of proof is zero, almost, just a probable cause hearing. Is there probable cause to go forward to trial? Well, yeah, that's just easy. It's a no-brainer. And that shouldn't bolster the DA's opinion on the strength of the case. It shouldn't. I do wonder this. Remember when this all began, up through and beyond the preliminary hearing, it was Gascon who was the DA in LA County. And Hochman just took over after the election in November. He took over December 1st. And we all know, especially because of the Menendez brothers case that Linda and I talked about and shared for the first time, the fact that, I could see it coming. We knew Gascon was out the door. And just because he was, politicking on getting the Menendez brothers out, I knew It could happen, and I'm not giving an opinion on whether it should or shouldn't. I'm just talking about the legal procedure. And I knew once Gascon was out, and he was losing 80% to 20% in the prelim. So, in the polling. So there's no way he was going to win. The question just became, what is Hochman going to do when he takes over? And I just knew it would be, kind of flippant to just tag on to Gascon's analysis and follow through. There was, I think, a January date, and then that was removed. And now Hochman is continuing to weigh all of the pros and cons. So just like that case, the Menendez case, Hochman inherited this case. And I wonder if there was anything going on in the background, between the DA. Remember, Lewin was added to the mix 1st of January for, barely weeks ago. What kind of conversations were going on between Lewin and Hochman? I can just imagine Lewin was steamrolling Hochman to just, this is a great case. We've got what we need. Let's go do it. And Hochman's, this case is a pimple on Hochman's ass compared to some of the other stuff going on, including the Menendez case and much fresher cases. So it might have been easy for Hochman to just say, okay, just go ahead. You've been doing this a while. I'm going to take your word for it. You and Polly P, get out there and take care of it. And so maybe that's how it ended up actually going to trial. It's an embarrassment. Now it's an embarrassment on Hochman's office. And again, we haven't heard from them as we've reached out today to see if they have any comments on our thoughts that the judge believes it's an unethical prosecution, or at least he's suggested that. Okay. So, okay. And I agree with Sheila as we're watching the end of this thing, it's just imploding on itself. They blow up a building and it just kind of collapses in on itself. That's what's happening. And Sheila calls it gold. Yeah. Like I said, I admit, officer of the court, I am outraged, but it's pretty fun. Pretty good stuff to watch. And again, we're lucky that nobody was murdered in this case. It was purely an assault with some injury, if true. We're just not sure if all of that's true, right? Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that. We'll check back in later. Don't forget, Neil Rockine will be here. We'll start at 6 o'clock, and we'll pop in. Depending on what happens, the court could end early today. If they don't have a few witnesses stacked up, they could end early today. If that's the case, Neil and I will be on from 6 to 7. We'll just kind of figure out what the heck is happening. He is an amazing defense attorney. I can't wait to get his take on some of these folks. Injurious personalities. Why did they not go the route of grand jury instead of the prelim? That's an interesting question. Some jurisdictions don't do grand juries. And California doesn't really use them very often. It's kind of an antiquated concept, to be honest with you. The more modern, traditional approach now, traditional, modern, dummy, that's the opposite. But the more modern approach is by a criminal complaint being filed. So no indictments from the grand jury. California just doesn't do that thing. So, and then they could waive a preliminary if they wanted, but because sometimes folks say, well, a prelim is just showing your hand, and that's why the defense at a prelim kind of lays down a little bit. In this case, though, and again, with Joey Tacopina's use of the transcript, it's clear he made a little more of a healthy defense at the prelim stage, probably because he thought it might not survive a prelim. And that's such a low standard. But him, he's not tipping his hand entirely. And we've seen in this trial, he's had, as I used to say when I was in court trying bigger cases, a surprise a day. That was always my plan. A surprise a day. In this case, it's been a surprise a day, but it's been a surprise to Relli at the hands of Joe Tacopina. Okay, I'm going to leave you alone unless you wander around with your thoughts. We'll be back at 6 o'clock with Neil Rockine. Any questions you think up in the interim or you pick up this afternoon when I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to feel like after Relli leaves, it's going to get a little slower than it has been, but maybe that's good. We'll see who shows up this afternoon for the afternoon session. And we'll be streaming it here, so please stick around. We'll see you in just a little